Guys, so this video is for chapters 8 and 9 together because it's such a short, chapter 9 is such a short chapter, and it really just deals with the aftermath of chapter 8. So we see Ellie's father die in chapter 8, and it's heartbreaking because of how painful it is for Ellie and all the kind of complicated emotions that it creates. So when they arrive in Buchenwald, Ellie's father has basically given up. We're starting to see a real role reversal between the two of them here. Right, for most of this novel, Ellie's father has been taking care of him. He hasn't let him sleep. He, like, when he was worried about hypothermia, he was watching over him during that time to make sure that he didn't die. He had been kind of Ellie's support system throughout this point. But here, he's so weak, he's so sick that he's just kind of given up, and he's kind of reverted to this childishness, right? As Ellie says on page 105, he'd become childlike, weak, frightened, vulnerable. So now it's Ellie's job to take care of his father. So we're seeing this kind of role reversal here. So Ellie is trying fruitlessly to kind of get him to get up, go eat, and take a shower and go inside. And his father wants nothing to do than to just kind of lay down outside. So Ellie goes because there's an alert, right? There's a raid or something like that. And he has to leave, and then he falls asleep. And then this is page 106. When I woke up, it was daylight. That was when I remembered that I had a father. During the alert, I had followed the mob, not taking care of him. I knew he was running out of strength, close to death, and yet I abandoned him. I went to look for him. And then he says instantly, yet at the same time, a thought crept into my mind. If only I didn't find him. If only I were relieved of this responsibility. I could use all my strength to fight for my own survival, to take care of myself. Instantly, I felt ashamed of myself forever. And I think Ellie's being unfair to himself here, right? They're in a horrifying position right now. There's really no win. And you know, Ellie wants to survive, but he also wants his father to survive. But it's unlikely that his father will at this point in time. He is so sick. He is so injured, so dehydrated, so emaciated, so all of those things, that there's just kind of no bringing him back. Even if he was in a hospital with actual care and things like that, and instead he's in a concentration camp where nobody cares about him except for Ellie. So, you know, he references the rabbi's son, right? Rabbi Eliyahu. So there's this little bit of foreshadowing where Ellie believes that he has failed in the same way that the rabbi's son had, in wanting to kind of leave his father. So Ellie's father is beaten close to the end there. On page 111, because he can't stop saying Ellie's name, Eliezer, Eliezer, over and over again. He's asking him for water, and he just keeps getting beaten. And Ellie is too afraid to do anything because he's terrified of himself being beaten, of dying right beside his father. So he's silent. He allows it to happen, which I think kills Ellie. It just tears him up inside. Page 112, I'm going to read a little bit. When I came down from my bunk after roll call, I could see his lips trembling. He was murmuring something. I remained more than an hour leaning over him, looking at him, etching his bloody, broken face into my mind. Then I had to go to sleep. I climbed into my bunk above my father, who was still alive. The date was January 28, 1945. I woke up at dawn on January 29. On my father's cot there lay another sick person. They must have taken him away before daybreak and taken him to the crematorium. Perhaps he was still breathing. No prayers were said over his tomb, no candle lit in his memory. His last word had been my name. He had called out to me, and I had not answered. I did not weep, and it pained me that I could not weep, but I was out of tears. And deep inside me, if I could have searched the recesses of my feeble conscience, I might have found something like free at last. So Ellie's feelings here are very complicated. If any of you have dealt with a relative or someone that's had to undergo a long sickness, I think you'd understand this really well. I remember when my grandmother was not doing well, right toward the end of her life, that it was such a painful journey to watch this person who I didn't really recognize her as, you know, this woman that I'd grown up with for so long, and to have her so changed, and to really just kind of long for the release of not having to see her this way anymore, right? Which is a selfish thing. But there's, it's also compassionate because you don't want them to suffer anymore. And I think that's what Ellie's dealing with, right? He has all these complicated feelings of guilt, of relief, of sadness. He's sad because his father is dead and he doesn't have that support system anymore. But he's also relieved because, one, he doesn't have to watch over him anymore. And two, his father is released from pain. He doesn't have to deal with the fact that he's dying of dysentery and being beaten and stuck in a concentration camp and all of those things right now anymore. He's free from that. Then I think he feels horrible, tremendous guilt because of that relief. And also because, as he said, his father's last words were his name, right? And he did not answer. He called out to me and I had not answered. And I imagine that, again, this was written 10 years after this happened. So for Ellie, this seems still 10 years later, very, very fresh. He is still kind of overcome with guilt over what happened here. Chapter 9 is really significant just in the fact that Ellie doesn't care about anything anymore. He's liberated and he doesn't care. He talks about how he only cares about one desire: to eat. I no longer thought of my father or my mother. From time to time I would dream, but only about soup, an extra ration of soup. So they've been just kind of, they've devolved basically into just these animals that only care about food. That's what they've kind of been reduced to by the Nazis and by their treatment. So when they are actually freed, he says, and this is on page 115, our first act as free men was to throw ourselves under the provisions. That's all we thought about. No thought of revenge or of parents, only of bread. Even when we were no longer hungry, not one of us thought of revenge. The next few days, a few of the young men ran into Weimar to bring back some potatoes and clothes and to sleep with girls, but still no trace of revenge, which is kind of amazing. You'd think that after undergoing what they did, they would want revenge on the Nazis. But because all their other kind of more animal needs have been kept away from them for so long, like their need to eat and sleep and all of those things, that it just kind of crowds out every other thought. So Ellie almost dies after the liberation, ironically, and he gets taken to a hospital. He spends weeks between life and death. And then he looks at himself in the mirror. And this is the first time he's looked at himself in the mirror since before the ghetto, or before leaving the ghetto. So it's been a year of concentration camp since Ellie has last actually looked at himself. And the transformation, I imagine, must have been one of the most shocking things he's ever seen. He said, from the depths of the mirror, a corpse was contemplating me. The look in his eyes as he gazed at me has never left me. So this is not, this book doesn't end on kind of an upswelling of hope, even though Ellie has been liberated. His mother is dead. His youngest sister is dead. His father is dead. He doesn't know what has happened to his two older sisters. He does find them later. They both do survive the concentration camps, but it doesn't matter really that Ellie survived because he has been changed completely and utterly. That young boy from the first chapter who, prayed and wept and was excited about life and all those things is gone. He's dead. And I think that's why Ellie talks about how a corpse is contemplating him, right? It's not just his physical appearance of how emaciated he is and all that kind of stuff, but it's also just how he feels. He feels as if he doesn't exist anymore. As he says, it has never left me. Right. So he has not escaped the concentration camps in any way, shape, or form. And I think they probably have stuck to him till his dying day. Elie Wiesel has done a ton of appearances. He's become an activist. He's a hugely important figure. He won the Nobel Prize. But he still isn't the person that he would have been had he never experienced these things. I think that's kind of the big takeaway here is that, while some people did survive the Holocaust, they didn't really survive. Those people that they never would be again. All right. So make sure that you take a look at the review game and that you are prepped for your very last unit test. Look forward to talking about this book with you. All right. Bye, guys.